What is up, all of my beautiful freaking people? Welcome back to another episode of FML Talk. It is a really good, powerful episode for you guys today. Najwa Zebian is here. She is a poet, an author, an activist, and I cannot wait for you guys to hear some of the stuff that she has to say on today's episode. So sit back, grab those self-love journals, and welcome to FML Talk.
Oh my God. Wait, how old was the other girl?
19. Can you believe that shit?
Hey, this is Gabrielle Stone.
Good book?
He did what? 48 hours?
What a dick.
Yeah, but have you seen all the photos on her Instagram? And this is FML Talk.
Oh, no, she didn't.
Y'all know I love a good self-love cocktail and occasionally an actual cocktail. I have always notoriously hated the taste of alcohol and needed it disguised in a good mixology cocktail until I discovered Neft. Because Neft is a premium vodka in its purest form with non-GMO rye, it has a light taste full of character. Not only is Neft one of the best tasting vodkas I've ever had, it also comes in the cutest packaging I have ever seen. Their unbreakable barrel keeps it chilled for up to 6 hours, making it the perfect drink to take just about anywhere. Join me in adding a little actual cocktail into your self-love cocktail with Neft vodka. Cheers! Okay, you guys, I can't wait to dive into this episode today. Najwa is such a beautiful soul. She has had such an incredible journey from writing her books to coming from Lebanon to Canada. Her story is just really miraculous, and she's so wise, and I'm really excited for her to share some of that knowledge with you all. One of the things we talk most about in this episode is building a home within yourself. And I think a lot of you guys are really going to benefit from the way she describes it and the way we talk about being able to let go. There's some healing tips and tricks in here, and it's really going to make you want to grab a copy of her books. So let's get into it. Najwa, welcome to FML Talk. I am so honored to have you here.
I'm so happy to finally connect with you this way because, your content has been coming up for a while and it seems like I know you, but I don't really know you. So I'm happy that we finally get to have this conversation.
I love that. I feel that way too. And so much of your content speaks directly to my soul. And I know it does to many other women as well. So I can't wait to dive in. Before we get into it, can you kind of give everybody a little bit of a background of your history and your journey that's brought you to doing what you do now?
Yeah, so I started writing when I was 13 years old. I was living in Lebanon at the time. And I started writing in my journal just about feeling like I didn't fit in, like I didn't belong. My parents would travel often, so I spent quite a bit of time living with different relatives. And so the theme that always came up was I wanted to feel like I mattered to someone. I wanted to feel like at the end of the day when I came home that someone looked forward to seeing me. And that was never the case. It was always I would see it around with my cousins and with my friends, but not with me. So I started writing just to give myself a voice that way. Not that I knew at 13 what giving yourself a voice means, but it just felt like the only relieving thing I could do that would help. And at the age of 16, right at my 16th birthday, I moved to Canada, where my whole family was here at the time. Like my parents were here, my brothers, sisters. And I didn't plan to fully move to Canada, but I was kind of stuck here because a couple weeks after I arrived, the war broke out in Lebanon, so I couldn't go back. It was a very sensitive year. It was right before grade 12 and university. And so I had to make a choice, which really didn't feel like a choice. So the result of me feeling like I was always displaced based on what worked for everybody kind of built a sense of resentment within, but I didn't know that that's what it was. But instead of resenting others, because I'm not the kind of person to do that, I don't usually give myself permission to even hold people accountable sometimes, because I'm just very kind in nature, and that's how I was raised, from a very young age. And so instead of, turning that resentment to the outer world, I kind of turned it inwards, and I just didn't want to feel anymore. And I stopped writing because every time I would write, I would feel like I was so aware of the pain I was going through, but also how helpless I was. So I stopped writing for about 7 years. And then when I started teaching, my very first teaching assignment was a group of young refugees from Libya. And I vividly remember the first time I saw them, seeing that same look I knew I had, when I came here at 16, that look of like, what am I doing here? And I don't fit in here. I don't belong here. I don't. And so I started writing again to empower them to feel like they don't need to fight for a place, that they are welcome, that they don't need to try so hard to just get to the level of everyone else around them. And in a way, I was healing all the wounds I didn't heal at 16 years old and at 13 years old and at every incident that happened in my life. And those writings, I compiled them into a book that I self-published in 2016. That's Mind Platter. And the rest is history. That's how I started writing. It was a cry to express myself in a way where I wanted to be able to say, this is how I feel, this is how I think, this is what hurts me, this is what I'm okay with, this is what I'm not okay with. And I know there are people out there in the world who feel that way too, and I want them to feel heard and seen as well. And so after Mind Platter, it was very well received. I grew on Instagram, like by hundreds of thousands of followers. And then I self-published another book later that year. And then I got a publishing deal for those two books and a third one. And then most recently, I got another publishing deal for my fourth book, Welcome Home, which is really that journey I was just telling you about. It's where do I belong? I belong within, with myself, because my home is within me, not within anyone else. Yeah. So that's a long answer, that I think would help anybody just know who I am.
Yeah, that's beautiful. And let's just dive into what you said at the tail end of that, building a home within, because I think that's such a beautiful statement. And I talk a lot about that in my work and on my platforms of needing to not look outside yourself for that love or that validation, and needing to find that within. But I know a lot of people really struggle with doing that. Can you share a little bit about what it means to you to build a home within?
So sometimes it helps to understand it by understanding the opposite. And I come from a teaching background, so that's one of the strategies I use as well. If there isn't a way that I can make it super powerful, I'll tell you what the opposite is. And so I realized shortly after I published my first book, I was standing on stage giving my very first TEDx talk, and it was about finding home through poetry, which is a title I came up with. And it was all about how, I found my place through writing. And I couldn't memorize the speech. Like, I'm really good at remembering things, but not in a certain order, not in a certain sequence. And so I was like, I'm just going to go up on stage and say what's in my heart. I'm going to be as vulnerable as possible. So these words just came out. The biggest mistake we make is that we build our homes on other people. We build those homes and we decorate them with all the love and care and kindness and respect that we want to come home to at the end of the day. And when those people walk away, those homes walk away with them, and all of a sudden we feel empty. So this was the turning point for me in that, is that emptiness we feel doesn't mean that we have nothing within. It just means that we put it in the wrong place. And if we were able to create it once, that means we are the source of it. That means we can create it again and give it to ourselves. So building a home within yourself means that you have a very solid foundation of self-awareness and self-acceptance. You know who you are authentically. You know who you are through your own eyes, not through the eyes of anybody else around you. Once you have that strong foundation of that authenticity, there is absolutely no way that you would allow someone into your life, into your home, including yourself, who's walking in with disrespect for you, with unkindness towards you, with devaluing towards you. So building that home makes you the safest, most what's the word I'm looking for? The safest, most, the person who believes in you more than anyone else. And instead of just seeking that safety and that comfort and that validation from anybody else around you, because that feels good, it really does. And the reason it
Sure.
feels good is we've been doing that our whole lives, right? So it means that you derive it from within and you don't need it from others. Now, here's the thing. Feeling hurt when someone doesn't validate you or doesn't give you the value that you know you deserve or the respect you know you deserve, there's nothing wrong with that. Of course, you're human. Being at home with yourself doesn't mean you're untouchable. It means that you feel things, but you don't allow your wanting of those external validations to come to you to change your approach with how you validate yourself. So you're not going to abandon yourself and who you are, which in certain ways it means changing yourself, or it means hiding parts of who you are just so that another person could be like, oh, I do see value in you. Because if they see value in you and that feels good, does it really feel good? Because they're not seeing value in you. They're seeing value in an image of you that you manufactured or created. So up above that foundation, because in Welcome Home, I kind of walk people through, like, we start with the road to home. We understand why is it that throughout our lives, we have been abandoning ourselves and not building a home within ourselves, building it within other people. And then you build the strong foundation of self-acceptance and self-awareness. And then in your home, you have rooms of self-love and forgiveness and compassion and surrender and clarity. So feeling your feelings is in the surrender room, because that's where you not just negative feelings and emotions, but positive ones as well. Clarity shows you who you really are and who the world around you really is and what the world around you really is. Self-love is, I don't need to explain it, but giving yourself the love that you would give to someone that you love. And also, this was one of the most mind-blowing things for me to imagine, because logically we know what it means to love ourselves, but it hits you sometimes when you think about it a certain way. And I thought one day, if I were to list out the people who I love the most, who I would do absolutely anything for, do I see myself up there?
Yeah.
And at the time I didn't. I would put everybody else ahead. And so I say, you put yourself at the top of that list, because it's your responsibility to love yourself more than anyone else out there needs to love you.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
Oh, that's so beautiful. Can you talk to me a little bit about the different rooms that you describe in the book that's in the house?
Yes. So with self-love, I just gave you a couple of examples, but I have certain tools in there. One of them is walk in your own shoes. So I give the example of how we always say, like, if you were to walk in my shoes, and you really empathize with other people, right? You put yourself in their shoes. So why not put yourself in your own shoes and try to give yourself actually, that's in the compassion room. I mix those two up, because the compassion room is all about empathy and all about a willingness to help. The reason I named it compassion is because if I were to just put empathy, it's feeling with someone, but compassion combines empathy with a willingness to help. So in the compassion room, you show yourself empathy the same way you would show it to someone else. And you show yourself the willingness to help the same way that you show someone else the willingness to help. So you're having a bad day, or if someone you love is having a really bad day, and they come to you and they say, I just had an awful day at work, what would you do? You probably would make a nice meal, make sure that whatever it is that they feel relaxed, you give it to them. So do you do that for yourself when you have a really bad day, or do you just kind of gaslight yourself out of your own needs and say, it's okay, I'll do other things for other people and that will make me feel better?
Right.
In the self-love room, one of the tools is imagining that you have a power bubble around you. And I came up with this when I was working in a place where I felt like many of the people around me were really toxic and would say things about me behind my back that really hurt my feelings. And so I started imagining that I had this protective layer around me, like wherever I went, I could see them, and I could see the hate, and I could see the negativity, but I wasn't going to allow it to go past a certain distance from me and from my heart. So yes, it still hurt to know that they thought certain things about me, but knowing that none of those things were true, I wasn't going to allow myself to internalize them. They had to stay
Right.
outside. And in the forgiveness room, that's one of the tools in the self-love room. There
I
are
love
so many
that.
more. Thank you. In the forgiveness room, I talk about forgiving others and also forgiving yourself. And I share quite a bit of stories from my own life where, I share a reflection in the forgiveness room where I say, I was sitting down trying to write this chapter and it just didn't sit right because I still felt like there were certain people who I really hadn't forgiven. What I did was I just put those events behind me in the past. And to me, forgiveness is never about saying what they did is okay. It's always about saying what you did to me no longer has control over me. And I might need to
Right.
forgive you once a month or once a week or once a day or once every 5 years when I remember what happened. But that forgiveness doesn't mean like we're at peace and we're fine and you're welcome into my life. No,
Right.
it means it's for me, not for you. You have to deal with what you did. And
Yeah.
so I sat down and had this like really deep reflection thinking, I've accomplished so much in my life and I've gotten to a point where I talk about forgiveness all the time. Like, how is it that I haven't fully forgiven? And it's because I numbed, like I looked at the strength that I had acquired despite what these people put me through, and I thought that was it, that was okay, that I didn't need to revisit those things. And every time I thought back to those events, I would still feel very hurt. And I was like, I need to forgive and move on. And I know I've seen some of your videos and other people's as well, where they say like, you don't have to forgive, but you don't have to forgive in the sense that that's it, I'm putting it behind me and I'm never going to be
Right.
hurt when I think about it. And no, for me, it's just about, it could be a momentary thing where you say, I'm being pulled back into this event and pulled back into this pain and pulled back into thinking that maybe I deserve it. Forgiveness means that I say, I actually didn't deserve it. That was wrong. I don't want it to affect me anymore because it doesn't deserve that kind of power. So in the
Yeah.
self-forgiveness room, there's many tools as well. One of them is it's a cutting cords activity, which is so weird when I wrote it because I didn't know that existed.
Oh,
When I wrote
really?
it
Yeah.
out, yeah, when I wrote it out, I was like, this is literally what I feel, because I felt like I was being controlled like a marionette by someone, like emotionally just and psychologically. And so I imagined like cutting those cords of like that power that I was giving certain
Right.
people. And so the scissors that you use to cut those cords are made of that foundation that you built your home upon, which is self-forgiveness and self-awareness. I know who I am. I know what I deserve. I know what I didn't deserve and what I don't deserve. And so I'm going to cut this so that I don't give that person, that source of pain, more power to control me or to control who I become. I become who I become because of who I want to become.
Yeah.
And I do intersperse some poetry into the chapters. So for example, in the forgiveness room, at the very end, there's a poem that literally it came to me like the first few lines, which were, I wish I could go back to the exact moment before the moment I met you. So that line came to me, but the others didn't. And I just knew something was coming out of this. So I wrote it down. And then like 3 days later, it just came to me in like 2 minutes. So that's the repeating line. I wish I could go back to the exact moment before the moment I met you. And I list all these moments, like the moment before I walked out the door, the moment before I said hello, the moment before I smiled, the moment before and it's like an escalation of events. And then at the end, I say, but oh, how I wish that my wish never came true. But oh, how grateful I am that my wish never came true, because I am who I am and I am where I am because I overcame all of that. And I use different words, but there's so much power in putting together stories and tools and poetry, because I feel like a person reading this really feels heard and seen.
So I love that when you talk about forgiveness, you talk about that you have to do it to not allow that to have control over you anymore. Whenever I talk about forgiveness, it's, you're not forgiving the person because they deserve it. You're forgiving them so that you aren't held captive by those emotions anymore. Because when we hold that anger or that resentment or that hate, it affects our heart and our health, and it changes the type of life that we live. So the forgiveness is to be able to allow that blockage that has built up in us to let go and be free of that. So I love that you talk about it in that way.
Yeah, thank you. Because to me, forgiveness always felt like a form of betrayal, the way that it was explained to me, because I never, ever, ever wanted to tell someone who was hurt that they needed to get to a point where they were just okay with what happened, because it's extremely okay for you to never be okay with something that happened to you. You can be at peace with it by saying, I know it happened. There's no point in me denying that it did, or living in denial and maybe just seeking comfort in I don't know, anything in life that distracts me from this pain. You have every right to say that wasn't okay. That's what forgiveness is. It's the letting go part. It's the seeing things as they are and refusing to define yourself by them, and refusing to allow yourself to dive into that pain as if it's just happening right now. And it's a series of moments where you become aware that you are getting sucked back in to that pain, and you say, I'm going to allow it to come in just for a little bit, but then it has to leave, because I have the right to live other moments and to have moments of joy. And that brings me to the surrender room, which is the room where I talk about letting your emotions in, whether they're positive ones or negative ones. And one of the tools in that room is sit with the pain. And I say, when pain knocks on your door, let it in, sit with it, have tea with it, listen to it, understand it, then walk it to the door, because it's time for you to experience another feeling and another emotion. And so with events that you feel you have to forgive, or people that you feel you have to forgive, you could totally use that approach, because you give yourself permission to just let that pain pass through you, as opposed to be a permanent resident in your home or in your space. And when you do that, you're the one in control, because you say, I'm going to feel this pain for 10, 15 minutes, but then I'm going to get up and I'm going to regroup and redirect and do something else and put my energy elsewhere. And sometimes with events that trigger you, especially traumatic events, you really can't control when you're triggered. And it's good to have a plan where you say, the moment I sense that I'm triggered, I will do that. I will call a friend. I will self-soothe in some way. So again, because I don't want anybody listening to say, well, I don't really have a choice with when I feel that pain. It's true, you don't, but have a plan for what you would like to do when that pain knocks so that you're not disoriented and constantly living in that state.
Yeah. And I really love when, we talk so much about like inner child work, and if you experience something like I lost my dad when I was 6 years old. So a lot of my abandonment stuff, I have to go back and talk to that 6-year-old little girl that's living inside me, and kind of coach her through things. And I love the analogy you gave of when pain knocks, like let them in, and almost like having it in your mind's eye of like, okay, what does the pain look like? Is it a version of me that was from my past? Is it another person that I'm feeling this pain around? And really like imagining whoever that is coming in and sitting down with you and having a conversation with them. That's really powerful to act something like that out. Like, what are they saying back to you? What do you need to say to them? And then walking them out the other end through a different door. Like, that's incredible.
Yeah, because you are the one in control. It's the same thing with meditation, right? You listen to your thoughts, you observe them, but you don't necessarily identify with them. You just say, oh, that's interesting that my mind is telling me that. That's interesting that I'm feeling that, but you're not saying I am that, or that is 100% truth. It's the same thing with those painful events and memories and people, is that you can be aware of them, but don't immediately think if I'm thinking that about this moment in the past, then it somehow defines me, or I'm helpless in how I relive it or how long it stays. No, you're not helpless. You can make a different choice for yourself in this moment and detach as much as you can, in a way that's healthy for you. And like I said, with traumatic events that genuinely you need a safety plan for, that's a different story. But at the same time, try to plan for it ahead of time for your own sake,
right,
so that you're not pulled in for prolonged periods of time.
Yeah, when I was growing up, my mom, and I'm sure I've told this story on this podcast at some point, but when I was in my angsty teenage years, I got into a fight with my mom, and we were, arguing with each other, and I started crying, and I was like, well, it's because dad died. And she looked at me and she's like, no, Gabrielle, you're never going to use that as an excuse ever again. You can be upset about it. You can have grief around it. You can speak about your feelings and be angry about it, but you'll never use that as an excuse to act a certain way ever again. And in that moment, I learned that whenever things happen to us in life, you get to a crossroads, and it's like, you've done your grieving, you've been angry, and you get to a crossroads, and it's like you can go one way and continue to be a victim to that situation and allow it to really define your life, and choose to allow that burden to stay with you, or you can go the other way and have it be something that happened in your life that is going to propel you forward and shape who you are, but not allow it to define you. And that was one of the biggest lessons I've ever learned in my life.
Absolutely. I agree with that so much. And at the same time, you have to be compassionate with yourself and remember that we all go through these different stages where we are so angry, or we are in denial, or there's the stages of grief, right?
Yeah.
So it's okay for you to feel angry. It's okay for you to be in that state of denial, but it's the awareness piece of, this is what I'm experiencing right now. And I'm very aware that I could either use it to justify bad behavior, or that I could use it to say, you know what, I need a break. I need someone to understand me. I need someone to listen to me. I need someone to help me. So it's what you're doing based on that awareness, because unfortunately, many people around us don't take that additional step to be aware of how what they're experiencing internally is manifesting externally towards others, there's quite a bit of defensiveness sometimes. There's quite a bit of laying blame on past events that have happened, or laying blame on others, or not taking responsibility. And all of that is stemming from there's something going on internally that you don't want to deal with. And so for you to feel powerful in some way or good in some way, you're projecting it out there. So once you have that awareness, it really humbles you, and it really destigmatizes you being vulnerable and real with the world around you, and just saying, you know what, I'm having a really bad day today, and I just would like some alone time, because I do know that if I'm around people, I might not be the best version of myself. Say that instead of actually being the worst version of yourself, you know?
Yeah.
Yeah.
The awareness and the accountability allows the vulnerability to be a lot more safe. And what comes from that to be more acceptable, I feel.
Yes,
yeah.
I agree. Many of us don't value that vulnerability or see it as a beautiful thing, because we've been trained to believe that feeling and that emotions are weakness, or expressing them as weakness. It's especially prevalent in certain cultures, but I would say there's an element of it everywhere in the world where it's like, you have to show no emotion, or you can't show somebody that they hurt you, or you can't be clear about what hurts your feelings. Actually, no, because if you do that, then you are pretending to be a wall or a rock.
Right.
What's the purpose of you pretending that you don't care or that you don't feel? If it's only to, especially like with this dating culture right now and the advice that we're seeing, I feel that a lot of it is just meant to keep like these little temporary ego-based chases. But for you to really find, you know, a person or a work environment or a career, whatever it is, where you genuinely feel like you can be yourself and you can say, hey, that hurt my feelings, or you have to be willing to lose people because you expressed yourself.
Yeah.
Right? Yeah.
Yeah, that's a huge lesson. I think so often, and you're right, there's so much toxic shit that gets spewed around the dating cultures, and like, well, you know, if someone doesn't text you back, you should be like this, or if, you know, someone in a relationship does this, then you should. And it's all, whenever my girlfriends have called me for advice in their own relationships, I always say the same thing, like, are you being your authentic self, and are you speaking and telling him your truth? Because if you're not, then what's the point of being in the relationship? And it's true, like you said, for a partner, a significant other, for a work environment, for friendships, like if you're not speaking what you need and what you feel, it's not an authentic relationship. So whether you're trying in the early games of dating to try and, you know, impress someone, that it's not going to last in the long run if you can't let your walls down and be vulnerable and be yourself.
Absolutely. And it doesn't last, because you can put on a show for a few months, but you're going to get tired at some point of pretending that certain things that really do matter to you don't matter to you. And again, like when you asked the question earlier, like, what are you getting out of the relationship if you're not being your authentic self? Well, most times it's getting that validation that as long as someone loves me, that means I'm okay.
Right.
Because for us, again, it goes back to building that home externally. You're building that safety externally, that validation externally. So you're saying someone loves me. They're not really loving me. They're just loving this version that fits what someone they love is like or looks like or whatever. But if they love me and I'm with them, then that must mean that I deserve love. And so that root pain that's there is feeling like you don't deserve love. And so you're putting a Band-Aid. This is how I describe it in Welcome Home. You're putting a Band-Aid on a gushing wound. you're not healing it. You're not,
Yeah.
it's just going to, at some point, it's going to continue hurting you until you heal it from the root. And then you're not going to need someone's love or presence in your life for you to say, well, their presence or their love means, their conditional presence, their conditional love means that, you know, I deserve love, but it's just with condition. But
Yeah.
that's not authentic love towards you.
Yeah. Was there a time in your life or an experience that happened that made you kind of awaken to all of this, when you were like, oh shit, I haven't built my home within myself and I need to readjust to do that? Was there something that prompted all of this?
It was honestly a series of moments throughout my life where, as I mentioned to you, I lived with multiple relatives. I got bullied in school for being sensitive and for being the good girl and for always doing the right thing and doing really well. And, you know, I'm a people pleaser since I can remember, because that's how my mom is. And she's very kind and everybody loves her, and I'm exactly like her. So every moment where I was prompted to make a choice for myself, I would feel this like enormous guilt for how everybody else around me is going to feel. So it was in moments like that where I was just sitting down and just reminding myself or asking myself, like, who am I living this life for? And what's the point of having, for example, my parents or my community or my friends or all these people happy and pleased with me and seeing me as a good person if I'm not happy? So like one of those moments was a few years ago. So I used to wear the hijab since the age of about 13 until about 28. So when I made the decision, or when I started thinking about it, I remember feeling like it was impossible, because if I let go of the way that I dressed, then that was going to somehow signal or symbolize that, you know, I wanted to show my body. And why would I want to show my body? That means bad things about me. That means I'm a bad girl. I'm a bad person. I'm a bad daughter. I'm a bad everything, and a bad influence on others, you know? And so that was one of the biggest decisions where I had one of those moments where I said, but I don't see myself covered anymore. I don't see myself covered anymore. When I think of what I would look like in 10 years or 20 years or 30 years, I actually don't see myself that way. And so that process of unveiling, which in Welcome Home, I talk about it as the like literal unveiling, but also unveiling layers of yourself and kind of uncovering before yourself so that you could figure out who you authentically are. That process of unveiling brought me closer to who I am, because it put me in situations where I was expected to explain myself, or I was expected to defend myself. And at the end of the day, that was such a personal decision. Why do I have to explain to you? But
Right.
I was the kind of girl who would just think for hours and days and not sleep at night thinking, well, how am I going to make sure that that person still sees me as a good person or whatever? And so I had to let go of that. And
Yeah.
that was a very powerful thing for me. And, you know, once you realize the kind of conditions that people had for loving you or respecting you or seeing you as a good person, and how shallow those conditions are if they have to do with the way you dress or with the way you speak or the way you live your life, you really do become grateful for taking that step to actually be yourself and to figure out who you are, because those people weren't serving you at all if that love is coming with condition.
That's so right. Yes. Did you, when you decided to do that and unveil yourself, did you feel any pushback from people? Like, were those
Absolutely.
fears substantial?
Yes, absolutely. And to this day, actually, I still sometimes, if I post something that is a little bit revealing, or however someone, you know, defines that, sometimes I wear a sleeveless shirt and I get comments saying, oh, like, at least dress a little modest, or I used to respect you, but I don't respect you anymore. I used to look up to you. And I still get so many comments that are like, I miss the old you. And I'm like, well, I'm not the old me. I am me now. The old me is part of me, but
is that from followers, like people you don't know, or from people that are in your life?
it's mostly people who follow me, but I have got it from multiple people in my life. So I actually wrote about this experience in Welcome Home, where shortly after I had taken the hijab off, I was at a family gathering and my aunt looked at me and she said, so you think you look good now? Like, she made a comment like that, and it hurt so much. It was in front of everybody, because there was an element of, you don't look good right now. And I was very, when I first took it off, I didn't know how to style my hair. I didn't, there were a lot of things that I wanted to learn and I was obviously just many times when I would leave my place, even though I still like covered my arms and fully covered my body, I still felt naked in a way, even with my neck showing. And so, here is one of my biggest fears being realized in front of so many people that I love. And I just didn't respond to her. And I remember that weeks went by, or months or something, but a period of time had gone by, and she called my sister and told her, tell Najwa that I apologize for what I said. And I think it was the silence in that moment, and not internalizing just whatever she aimed at me, whether it was hate or I really don't know, not allowing it to turn me into someone I'm not, because I wasn't going to say something mean or hurtful, because that's just not who I am. But I've had, distant family members who say things about me like I'm a bad influence because I don't cover anymore. And I don't listen to those things anymore at all, because someone else's choices for themselves, don't blame me for them. And if I've influenced someone to make a decision for themselves, then I'm proud to say that I did influence them,
Yeah, and it's so clear from your books and your following and your work, like how many people you've influenced in such a incredibly positive and helpful way.
Thank you. Thank you.
Yeah, I can't imagine what that must have been like. You talk a lot about in your work of the concept of letting go.
Yes.
I am notoriously bad at being able to let go and kind of release control. So can you share a little bit about your kind of thoughts and philosophy around letting go?
So quite a bit of letting go is about forgiveness, mostly self-forgiveness, because a lot of what we get stuck on is, oh, I wish I did something differently, or I wish I just stood up for myself in that moment, or I wish maybe if I was different with that person, they would have stayed and they wouldn't have left me, or maybe if I stayed on that path, then there's a lot of ifs that are based in the past. And sometimes you do have to let go of like future goals for yourself, or the image of who you thought you needed to be. And so for me, it's all about bringing yourself back to what you only have control over, which is right now, nothing else. So when you think of a past event that you regret, show yourself the kind of empathy that you would show a friend who's sitting across from you. Like, I do understand that you wish you would have done something differently, but is there really a point in putting all of your energy into that right now? Because the past is behind you. And one of the strategies that I use that actually really helps me, like I remember the day that this came to me, it came out of a personal struggle of being stuck in the past and not having the ability to let go of just the feelings I had towards someone in the past. And so I imagined that I had the past on one side and the future on one side, and I was in the middle. And what I was experiencing was like both of them were inching their way in. I wasn't living in the now. I was constantly either consumed in the past or fears for the future. Like, if I let go of this, what is it going to mean about this? And, we want to be anchored to something, because it's better to be anchored to something than be like floating and not anchored to anything at all. So that's why so many people will stay in jobs that they don't like, because they have that safety. But what if I let go and I don't find something else, or a person, or whatever it is? Or if I let go of the image of the woman that I've been trained to become, then who am I? Like, that's too scary, and I'm going to lose too many people. And so I would put all of these events, moments, definitions, whatever, that I identify with from the past and the future, and I would just imagine that I'm physically pushing them away. And that helps so much, because you are literally reminding yourself that none of this matters and none of this matters. None of the past and none of the future. This right now. And it's so relieving and freeing. So whatever it is that you are aiming to let go of or having a hard time letting go of, just the moment that you remind yourself that you're in control of seeing it, but saying, I don't want you in my space right now. I want to build something else. I want to do the next best thing that I can do. Then it makes it so much easier to do that. But, if you ask me specific questions about letting go, I can give you different strategies. But in general, that's what I would say is a very powerful tool to really let go of anything, is to bring yourself back to right now. What am I feeling in my body? If you were to close your eyes, this is like, I can't tell you how powerful it is. And do this next time for whoever is listening. The moment you're triggered by a word you hear or a behavior that you see, whether it's towards you or towards someone else, instead of immediately going to your mind and making a judgment about that, close your eyes and go to your body and see where the tension is. For me, it's mostly in my arms. So if it's in your arms, what I do is I start either like rubbing my arm or tapping to release that energy. Because I learned that, whatever it is that triggered you, it's coming from a place in your body where trauma was compiled trapped over the years. So you physically have to release it. And when you do that, you are not sitting there getting stuck in how could they, and no, you're saying, oh wow, this is what my body feels like right now. Like, I can't believe that what my mind thinks is or what I feel trapped in. When I go into my body is actually telling me to escape, but I'm not listening to my body. I'm listening to what my ego is trying to tell me. And so when you go into your body, you are allowing yourself to be with yourself and to self-soothe in a way. That also really helps with letting go, because instead of focusing on changing whatever it is, you're focusing on changing what's within. And you're focusing on validating for yourself how that event affected you, instead of trying to change it so that you're not triggered.
Yes. Oh, I love that. And I love the analogy of pushing both of them away. What if, because I know a lot of people listening to this show are struggling in letting go of a relationship that hurt them. What would you say if it's more about centered around a person that you're trying to let go of?
I could say with 99% confidence, because there's always that 1% that will tell you otherwise, that the pain has nothing to do with that person. The pain has to do with your belief that you don't deserve a certain kind of love. That's the pain.
Yes.
I talk about this in Welcome Home, where I say one of the strategies in the surrender room is don't try to change an ending, to change the ending. And what I mean by that is your whole life, you've lived in a way where certain things have happened that have proven to you the same end, which is, I don't deserve love. And so when you're struggling with someone leaving you, that's one of the endings, right? You're trying to change that one ending in any way, just so that you could convince yourself that that big ending of everybody walks away and I don't deserve love is not true. So you're not trying to change the limiting belief you have about yourself. You're trying to change one of the results of you having that limiting belief so that that limiting belief will go away, and it's not going to work. So if you remind yourself that it really isn't about that person, because most people that I talk to are struggling with a breakup will tell you, I wasn't happy, but like I should have left, you know? But that's your ego, right? If you weren't happy, then who cares who left? Was it right for you? No. You want your ego to feel better, like you would have wanted to end that relationship just so that you feel better about yourself. You haven't solved the problem. You haven't gone back to that story that you've been telling yourself your whole life. So focus on that story. Focus on extracting it from the root. In Welcome Home, I refer to it as the why can't I have that story? And for me, that was feeling important to someone, feeling loved, feeling embraced. Like from my earlier years when I lived with different relatives, just seeing how they embraced their kids, I would think, why can't I have that? So what's your that? And change the why can't I have that to why don't I have that, so that you can give yourself power to actually have that. But as long as you're saying, why can I never blah, 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 or why can't I, that shows impossibility and you want to get rid of that. And so you need to go back to the pain, like what's really hurting you right now. It's not the person, because if that person was right for you, you wouldn't be hurting over them right now. And again, I said there's always that 1% that's like, you know, I lost someone who I really love, or this person was actually the right person for me, but you know, they were deployed somewhere, things like that, where this will not apply. But in most cases, you need to go back to the root source of the pain and extract it and get rid of it. And the only way to do that is to live through who you are, and before that comes discovering who you are. So it's a process, it's a journey. It's not going to happen overnight. It's not going to happen by you listening to this one episode. You have to do the work that it takes to just obliterate those beliefs that you have about yourself from the root. Yeah,
I talk about that all the time, that if you're attracting something, it's not unlucky. It's not, oh, why do I keep like attracting people that cheat on me? Why do I keep attracting people that are mean to me? There's something in you, that limiting belief that you spoke about, that's attracting that. And until you fix that or go back to the root or the source of the pain, as you say, you're not going to be able to attract something different. And so that's so important to know that it's not about them. It's about you and what you need to fix within, in that home inside yourself, before you can have someone that comes and complements that.
Yes, it's all about self-reflection. It's all about the self, instead of like thinking, oh, why is he doing that, or why is she doing that, or just stop. You don't have control over that. You have control over you. You have control over what you accept. You have control over what you believe about yourself. You do, because the moment you realize that you don't believe you deserve love, it is your responsibility to do the work to get to a place where you genuinely believe that you do deserve love. You would do it to your niece, you would do it to your friend, you would do it to someone around you. So why not do it to yourself?
Yes, that's right. Oh my God, so much goodness that you just dropped on us today. I cannot thank you enough. Can you tell everybody where they can find you and where they can get the books, please?
Yeah, so you can find me on all social media platforms: Instagram, Facebook, Twitter, TikTok, and it's all at Najwa Zebian, NAJWAZEBIAN. Also on YouTube, I have much longer videos, and my books are available literally wherever books are sold. Welcome Home is the most recent one. It has the bird on it. You can't miss it. And yeah, those are the places where you can find me. And I hope that listening to this episode, I thoroughly enjoyed talking to you, and I hope that everybody who's listening, if there's anything you took today, I hope it's to start becoming aware of moments where you feel that you are abandoning yourself to be welcomed by someone else, and try to redirect and say, I want to become that for myself so that I never have to abandon myself to be welcomed elsewhere.
Oh my God, that's so fucking powerful. I love it so much. Thank you for being here. I thoroughly enjoyed finally connecting with you. So I really appreciate it.
Thank you. Same here. And I look forward to reading all of your books.
Yay, ditto, girl. I cannot wait. I want to thank Najwa so much for joining us on FML Talk today. I hope you guys got a lot out of today's episode. I picked up some things that really resonated with me, and I hope you did too. As always, make sure you are subscribed so you never miss an episode. Keep up with us on Instagram at FML Talk Podcast. And as always, have a self-love cocktail on me. Cheers.